India, Lesson 10. Pictured here is the Taj Mahal. It took over 22 years to build the Taj Mahal at a cost of 32 million of today's dollars. Pictured at the right is Mount Everest, which towers at over 29,000 feet. Now, as you listen to Lesson 10, follow along with your guide as we move on to Physical Geography of India. The Indian subcontinent has 3 regions. We call India a subcontinent because geologists believe that India was once free-floating, kind of like Australia, and collided with the rest of Asia. Remember our continental drift theory, and when the continents looked a little bit different than what they do today. The idea is that when India collided with the rest of Asia, that the mountain ranges were formed in the north. When we talk about the mountain wall, you'll see why. As a result, the Indian population has developed independently from the rest of Asia because it was isolated or cut off with the mountain ranges. The mountain wall is our first of the 3 subregions. Here we have the Himalayas, which are located here, and on your follow-along guide, you should locate the Himalayan mountain range by writing it across your map. Here with the little triangle, you should locate Mount Everest, that was pictured on the first slide. The Karakoram mountain range is here in blue, and you'll want to locate that and write that in on your map. And the Hindu Kush, which is right around here. Now you can see how geologists kind of explain the theory or the idea that the Indian subcontinent kind of crashed into the rest of Asia, forming these mountain ranges. The next region of the subcontinent is the Indo-Gangetic Plain. This is a large lowland south of the mountain wall. It is located here in green. Please locate it on your map. Here you will also find 3 of the major rivers, although they are not the only rivers in India. They are the 3 that I have chosen to highlight. The Ganges River, which when we watch our video we'll see that is super important to the Hindus. The Indus River, which is one of the oldest river valleys in the world, home to many civilizations over time. And the Brahmaputra River, which is kind of the eastern part of the region that's close to India. Now, the Deccan Plateau and Coastal Plain is south. So as we work our way south, you'll see that this is pictured in pink here. It's a rocky plateau bordered by narrow coastal plains in the east and the west. Finally, we have a couple mountain ranges to talk about. They are the Western and the Eastern Ghats. So here in the west, we have this mountain range that you'll want to locate as you have done the rest of the physical features, and the Eastern Ghats, which is located on this side of the Indian subcontinent. Now, let's talk about monsoon winds. What are monsoon winds? They are winds that change with climate every 6 months. Monsoon winds are the dominant climate in South Asia. These are winds that blow from Africa to India and then 6 months later completely reverse and blow from India to Africa. So in the winter, the winds have shifted and they are blowing from India to Africa, which brings drought-like weather, not a lot of rain. Now, when the winds reverse 6 months later, it is summer and it is a very rainy, wet season, and that is because the winds are blowing from Africa to India and they bring all that moisture off the ocean to India. And you can see here in the illustration how the winds have changed and completely reversed direction. Here's a nice picture of a street scene in India during the the rainy summer season. Religions in India. Please record 3 to 5 facts about each religion on your follow-along guide. The first one we will discuss is Hinduism. Hinduism is a way of looking at life. It's surrounded by Brahman, who is the universal spirit. A few highlights here is that Hindus believe that reality is one. We will see about reincarnation when we talk about the caste system also. And because of this reincarnation and reality being one, most Hindus that follow the religion closely are vegetarian. The cow is a sacred animal in Hinduism. It is not uncommon to see cows wandering around the street as they are revered. Cars will swerve out of the way to avoid hitting a cow. The law of karma simply means what comes around goes around. That you should live your life in a good way so that when you die and you are reincarnated, you may be reincarnated to a higher status. Indians do not bury people, but they cremate their dead. Cremations occur along the holy Ganges River. The red dot you see on the woman's forehead between her eyes is called a bindi. It used to signify marriage. Today it might still signify marriage in some cases, but you will see Indian girls wearing this as well, more as a decoration. Sikhism. Sikhism preaches a message of devotion and remembrance of God at all times, truthful living and equality of all men. The teachers or founders of Sikhism were called gurus, and there were 10. You might hear somebody talking about an expert in soccer or an expert in teaching or an expert in martial arts. You might call them a guru. That means they know a lot about it and they are an expert. They could teach other people. That term comes from Sikhism. Our last religion that you'll find in India is Buddhism, and we have discussed this when we looked at China. Buddhism simply means nothing is permanent except things that break down and decay or age and change. Buddha being the founder. And we also learned in the China lesson that Buddhism, people live their life according to the Four Noble Truths in hopes of achieving nirvana. The people of India. Let's talk about the caste system. The caste system is not strictly followed anymore, and the Indian country is becoming divided between people who value traditional beliefs and the caste system in the old way, and then the newer generation, the young people, the middle class, that is really kind of progressing and kind of leaving behind these traditions of old. The Hindus created the caste system a long time ago, 1,000 years BC, in which you are born. You don't have a choice. It doesn't matter who your parents are. It doesn't matter how much money you have. But you're born into a class or a caste, which is called a varnas, and it is based on your karma from your past life. Remember that Indians are cremated and they believe in reincarnation, and so when you are reincarnated and you come back to this world, this life, you may be reincarnated in a lower caste or a higher caste, or maybe even an animal, which is another good reason to be vegetarian, right? Social ranking is not just based on your occupation or what you do, but also on your religious significance. And it's because of this that the Brahmin or the priestly caste is the top caste or the most significant in the society. And as we go through the caste system, you will see that each caste is assigned Brahmin's a body part. And so for here, it's the head. And that kind of makes sense because these would be the teachers of Hinduism. So they have a lot of knowledge, a lot of wisdom, and so their symbolic part would be Brahmin's head. And that houses the brain, kind of makes sense there. The Kshetra is the warrior caste, and the Kshetra signifies or symbolizes rather Brahmin's heart and breastbone. And if you've ever heard that war is passionate and that soldiers are passionate and they're brave, and that kind of makes us kind of understand why the heart and the breastbone was chosen. The heart, in the figurative sense, is the passion and the love and so forth, and the breastbone being the protection of your chest cavity. And so that makes sense for the warrior caste. The Vaishya are the merchants and farmers, and they are assigned Brahmin's thighs, and they are not super important, so thighs are not that important in terms of body parts, but they are needed to stand with your body. And so the merchants and the farmers are needed in the society because they produce goods and farmers grow food. The Shudra are the servants and the unskilled workers, and they are Brahmin's feet. Again, as we work our way down, you see the significance of the body part is decreasing, and Brahmin's feet being kind of the lowest of the caste. And that's because you could live without your feet if you really had to, but they're good for getting around on, right? So servants and unskilled laborers are kind of people that are needed, but not super important. Now, the last group is not actually included in the caste system and is not assigned actually a body part, but is assigned instead mud. And the outcast or the untouchables are assigned the lowest jobs, and they are the street sweepers. So cleaning up trash in the street, garbage, burning bodies along the holy Ganges River, and so forth. The things that other people would rather not do, the untouchables or the outcasts do. Now, this caste system is not really strictly followed anymore, but it used to be very important for the Hindus. And the untouchables or the outcast, because were not included in the caste system, were a group of people that you would never associate with if you belonged to the other four castes. This would also be a good reason to have good karma, because eventually you're going to die, and when you become reincarnated, you would like to stay in one of the four castes. You don't want to be down in the untouchable group. Now, the untouchable groups, it's kind of like the cooties. You really wouldn't want to touch an untouchable, and so you just would not associate with them at all. And touching an untouchable, because they do these horrible jobs and stuff that are dirty that nobody wants to do, you would spiritually contaminate yourself, and that would have an effect on your life and also your reincarnated status. Commensality is eating and drinking with members of your own caste, and so you would stay kind of in your own group. There was no mobility once you were born. You were born in that caste, and that was it. You can't work your way up like you could maybe in our country. Our class system is based on money, and I think we could all agree that there are groups of people that could make a lot of money and lose all of it and be lower down in the class system, and vice versa. You could have not a lot of money, win the lottery, or work really hard and rise in the class system. And so that is called social mobility, which we have in our country. In the caste system, when it was strictly followed, there was no mobility. You were born, and that's where you stayed until you died. So the commensality is that you would only drink with members of your own caste. Okay, definitely there were certain sections of the city that were reserved for your caste. Endogamy is marrying within your own caste, so that makes sense. You wouldn't marry somebody from another caste. And Jyoti are caste subdivisions, and they would practice the same occupation. So in the Vaishya caste, you have a Jyoti of merchants and one of farmers. They would have two different kind of subcaste, because all of the people that would be farmers would be grouped in that Jyoti, and all of the merchants would be grouped in the other one, but they would all be a part of the Vaishya. And language. The official language is called Hindi, although English is considered official also, and many Indians are learning English as well. Sanskrit is a very old language and is used in both Hinduism and Buddhism. This is simply just kind of a hierarchy of visual for you to look at to see that most people kind of fall at that bottom couple tiers, the outcast kind of being even below that, and then the Brahmin being the very few, so it's the smallest portion of the pyramid, and those are the priests or the teachers of Hinduism. Now let's talk about Indian government. The capital is New Delhi. The structure is Federal Republic with a president and a vice president, similar to our own. And if you see the flag here, we've got three colors and a symbol. The orange, the kind of muted orange, means courage and sacrifice and so forth. The white is purity and truth, and that's pretty common with flags and symbolism. The green symbolizes faith and fertility. And the blue symbol is the wheel of life in movement and also in stagnation of death. This concludes our lesson 10 over India. Thank you, and have a good day.